Welcome to episode 5 of the unofficial fxhash untitled series thing. Should probably come up with a title at some time. In this video, we will be covering, as an artist, should you put your code on chain or not? And the short answer is yes or no. I mean, yes if you can, and no if you can't, and it probably doesn't matter anyway. I'll explain in a moment. I don't think there's any housekeeping notes this week. I think this video is going to run a little bit long, and that's because the answer to the on-chain question isn't really that easy. But first... Hi, I'm Catt, contemporary print artist and actual, real human. I'm not an AI influencer, nor have I ever been an AI influencer, or indeed an influencer. There's no news this week. Obviously, that's a lie. 2 days time, December the 1st, fxhash version 2 goes live. That's about 1 PM for me, so I'm going to be hanging out in the Discord, and I think it should be pretty fun. So first, a tiny bit of news. The test net dev environment has been updated to fxhash version 2, so I can see how we connect to the ETH and Tez wallet and the whole uploading process. So we'll run through that at the end. Some of that might have been updated on the live site by the time you see this video, if not, maybe a few hours, and then you'll be able to log in with your ETH. And the second big news is there's been so much interest in the launch and so many projects crammed into the launch week that they're turning that into the launch month to give the projects more room to breathe. Personally, I was all, yeah, I'm going to drop a project on day one, and then I was like, actually, you know what, it's kind of busy, I'll push it back to the following Wednesday, and it still feels too intense, so I'm moving my own project, Monster, all the way back to the 20th of December, which I think is a better fit for it all. As an artist, there's this little voice going, but what if you miss out on all the launch assignment? What if a bunch of people come in and then they all go away before the 20th? And then I remember, that's not the reason why I'm making art. I've kept releasing projects in utter lulls in the market. So releasing it because it's the right time for the art, not because the market feels like the right time, is the correct thing to do. And of course, I'll still be part of launch month. So yay for that. And also, I may still have a tiny little small surprise different mini project for the first, but that's kind of a secret. Okay, we'll come back for a bit more news at the end. Let's get on to the main thing. And I need a better sting for that. Anyway, so this topic is, should you put your project on chain or not? Now, if you missed my video about how much it costs to put things on chain, then go back and look at last week's. That's video number 4. The short answer is, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion anyway. For some collectors it does, for others it doesn't, and I'll explain why in a moment. And then for another whole group of people, they'd prefer if it actually wasn't on chain. I find that a bit weird, whatever. So, generative art is already super niche. If you look at generative art historically compared to, say, landscape painting, it's this tiny slither of a handful of artists, and the recent explosion in generative art has turned that into a slightly bigger slither, of which the on-chain ETH collectors are once again just a teeny tiny small slithers, lots of slithers. So if you're trying to min-max your profits, then making amazing art that's pushing your own ability as not only an artist but furthering your body of work, bringing something new to the whole generative art space, getting noticed if you don't happen to be one of the big players, promoting yourself, then chance, luck and timing, all these things will affect if your work sells or not and play a bigger part. If it's on chain, it's just like a tiny little bit of all that. And if you've nailed all those other things, like amazing art, self-promotion and so on, then maybe it makes a slight difference to your mint count and pricing, and if it's on-chain calculation. Or maybe put another more harsh way, if your project only sells like 10 mints or stores halfway through selling, it wasn't because it wasn't on chain. Like, oh no, if only I put my project on chain, it would have sold out. Darn it, it was down to that one choice, not all the other stuff. Having said that, if your code is small enough to put on chain, and the small enough is obviously the important part of that, then you may as well put it on chain in my view. And the thing to keep in mind is that the price of doing so will probably be recouped by the first 10, 15, 20 mints that you sell. So when viewing it as a cost of business calculation, if you know your costs of putting on chain and you set your prices and you think that you'll sell enough at that price to cover your costs of putting it on chain, then you may as well do it. But to drill in a little, let's start with why you shouldn't put your code on chain. The first is generative art, it's evolving to the extent that the phrase is getting very much like conflated with AI art, especially if you look on Twitter, or AI generative art, to the point that what I create and what we generally see on places like art blocks and fxhash is possibly better being called algorithmic art or creative coding. You know, code that directly makes art. But now generative art also includes code that makes systems that make art, including neural networks, GANs, AI systems, other big things that take time to generate art. It's still generative art, but the code, the system, is too big to put on chain, so it has to live somewhere else. IPFS. So if we say all projects must be on chain, you lose those types of projects. It may be the code is small, but it takes a very long time to generate the art, or the algorithm creates really amazing pieces of art, but also sometimes really terrible outputs. And you can't have one, the amazing art, without the other. So the generative artist creates thousands upon thousands of outputs and then curates the top 100, and those outputs end up going on IPFS, and the code that goes on chain is just one that matches the mint number with the output. Another area is post photography, which is often mixed in with AI art, and then maybe a little bit of video and audio too, and it uses so many assets like video, so many photos, that it can't go on chain. There's all these perfectly valid expressions of generative art that can't go on chain even if you wanted to. And if you're limiting yourself or artists to just being on chain, then you're closing off all those other aspects from a platform and collectors, which brings me back to on-chain ETH collectors. I'm really pleased fxhash is adding ETH because it opens it all up to ETH collectors who don't care about testing or bridge or credit cards or whatever. And by fxhash allowing off-chain, generative, open AI art on ETH, it allows artists to do artwork that they couldn't do when constrained to keeping the code just on-chain. But there's still some ETH collectors who will only collect on-chain projects. Here's why. Again, in my opinion. And I'll try really hard to keep this brief, but there's a little bit of background to go through, and I'm going to use a really bad analogy too. So, starting with base principles, and you could argue all the technical details about what I'm going to say, but that would make this a much longer video than it already is. First, the artwork is not the NFT. Media gets this wrong all the time. They go, hey, look at this NFT, and show the image. And I totally get why, but the NFT is the token that acts as the receipt for owning the artwork that it's pointing to over here. Two separate things. The receipt, the proof of the thing, and the thing itself. The receipt, this here, lives on the blockchain, and we'll come to that in a moment. The artwork lives somewhere else because it's too expensive and too big. It's too huge a thing to put on the blockchain. And people have quite rightly gone back to look at old NFTs, the old receipts, and seen that the images that they point to have now disappeared somewhere. They don't exist anymore. The NFTs haven't vanished. People still own the NFTs, but the visual thing that represents those NFTs no longer exists at the location that the NFT is pointing to. The NFT hasn't vanished, this thing over here has. Say I bought a physical painting and I have the receipt, and I buy a laptop and a camera and a bunch of other stuff, and I put those receipts into a fireproof safe, and everything lives in my house. I can't fit all the things like the camera and the laptop and the picture in the fireproof safe. It's not big enough, and it will be too expensive to build one that was. And then, oh no, my house burns down. I lose all the things, the bike, the picture, everything, but I still have the receipts. I still have the things that prove that I once owned all this stuff. And if I have insurance, I can buy back some of those things. The original painting, however, that's gone. In the digital world, where we have perfect copies, that's a slightly less of an issue, but again, that's a whole other video again. Now, we have IPFS, which is a distributed file system. Each file we place into the IPF system has a unique fingerprint. So my artwork has a unique ID, and it's over several different computers and servers all over the place. Storing things on IPFS is way less expensive than up on the blockchain. You wouldn't put it on the blockchain. The NFT points to the fingerprint of an artwork, and then when I want to go view that artwork, it snags it from whichever computer or server is the closest or the fastest, or whatever a distributed computer system does. However, the blockchain holds everything, well, for the moment, while IPFS generally holds stuff that's being used. So if an online game was using lots of assets and those were stored on the IPFS, and each time one of those gets access to background, an image, a character, something like that, it goes to the top of the I'm being used list and everything else moves down. If everyone stopped playing that game because a new better game came out, then these files would stop being accessed and they would sort of slowly move down the list and eventually get garbage collected. People and institutions are donating like drive space to store this stuff, and why store stuff that's no longer being used? Say an online virtual art gallery exhibits popular and important generative art, and that art gets viewed all the time, so it always stays churning away at the top of this list of things being accessed. The artwork that you bought 2 years ago that no one is like looking at anymore, then that was a little weird. Sometimes you, or people, or the artist, or a collector, or a platform can pin things, which means they say we're always going to host these artworks on their own IPFS node, and it's always going to be at the top of the list, so your artwork is safe if it's pinned. So all of this applies to code that's stored off-chain too. If our NTF artwork disappears from the IPFS, but the code is still there, we can take the hash stored in our token safely on the blockchain, feed it into the code, and then regenerate the artwork perfectly and go, well, the original has disappeared, but here's the proof over here that I own it, and here's a provable exact copy which, if all the distributed original copies of the file on IPFS had the same fingerprint, and this new image generated by the code is the same size and resolution, it should have an identical copy with the same fingerprint, or be a provably genuine recreation of the original, because digital ownership is a little bit weird. But what if both the image and the code vanish from IPFS and you're left with an NFT that points to neither of those things? Then things get a little bit harder. But if the artist puts the code on-chain, the same chain as the NFT lives on, those two things will always coexist. The hash from the NFT can always be put into the code to recreate the artwork identical to the very first time it was created at some arbitrary point in time. If the chain goes away, the whole blockchain, then you have neither the NFT or the code. That is the same as me buying the laptop, the camera, the bike, the original painting artwork, and popping the receipts into a drawer, not the fireproof safe, and then my house burns down, and my house was also the bank, and all the records of all transactions ever. That the image no longer exists is probably the least of your worries when everything else is burnt down too. But, I mean, you can just email yourself the original JPEG, so that's fine, I guess. For some collectors, it's important that the code exists on-chain from like a philosophical and technical ownership point of view, because the bet is that the blockchain will continue to exist in some form long after all this other stuff vanishes off IPFS. Having proof of owning the artwork and the means, the code to recreate the artwork existing together on the same chain is important. Other people don't care. But all of that I've just said is why some collectors will only collect on-chain artwork, or maybe more importantly, value on-chain artwork slightly higher. And if those collectors stick to just on-chain projects, then they're choosing not to collect all the artwork that for various reasons can't go on-chain. So the post-photography stuff, AI stuff, and so on. I predict, which I know is a terrible thing to do, that as more artists explore more aspects of the growing area of generative art, which now includes, but isn't limited to, algorithmic art, that the number of collectors will grow too, and the number who are on-chain purists, will remain a small percent of the whole collector base, and purely algorithmic art will also remain a small percentage of the expanding generative art movement. That's quite a lot of air quotes, sorry about that. So, if you're an artist creating code that makes art, and that code is small, and you think you can sell enough to cover the costs of putting that code on chain, and you believe that some collectors will value that slightly higher, so you can demand a slightly higher price, and you take into account you may no longer be getting secondary sales, then I would suggest putting code on chain just because it's cooler. Personally, I'm excited to put test projects on chain because the cost to do so is super low, and I like that the code and the token exist in the same place. But I'm also excited to explore off-chain ETH projects because it'll allow me to bring in other elements of generative art that I couldn't do before on other platforms, such as mixing in photography that I love with my code and doing really fun generative art photography projects, stuff I enjoy. So there's no definitive correct answer, and after you've decided what type of project you're doing, which may force you to be off-chain anyway, is probably the least important decision compared to all the other parts of producing an artwork collection and selling it. You're going to be focusing on things like, making it good, getting it noticed, all those things. I bet it's no clearer now, but I tried my best, and there you go. So right, on to news 2. Okay, so there's an update on the dev testnet fxhash site for what fxhash 2 is going to be. So let's run through the process of uploading a project onto ETH and see how it goes. Maybe even get an answer to how much it costs. Now, I pre-recorded this interaction that I'm about to show you earlier because I knew I'd screw parts of it up and I wanted to be able to just cut it and make it nice and smooth. So now I'm going to pretend to be doing what shows up on the screen there for you while narrating. So first, I'm going to connect to ETH up here. Now, it's worth noting at this point that if you already have a Tez profile on fxhash, then log in with your Tez profile first, and then log in with your ETH wallet, and it'll connect that profile to your Tez profile. It'll all be good. If you're logged out, log in with your ETH wallet first, you'll create a new profile connected to your ETH wallet, which you'll then have to delete, log back out again, log in with your Tez. Anyway, trust me, do your Tez first, and then your ETH. Right, let's get back to it. I'm trying to mint a generative token. So I'm connecting, and then I'm going to switch to the testnet. All right, and now I'm going to do, look, new ETH project. Amazing. So let's click on that. I can then say, it's me, I'm doing this, and it's going to be on-chain or IPFS. I'm going to do on-chain, and then I'm going to drop my zip over onto here to upload my project, upload it. So this is all the same here, is that I can test all these things, generate them. So I'm just going to accept these. I'm going to move on, click, click. I'm selecting my trigger for how to do a preview. This is all in my code. I'll explain this in another video. And I'm going to say, oh, canvas. Okay, nice. I'm not even going to test the capture. Carry on. Okay, so they both look the same. Next step. Now, additions. So we've got fixed here. So I'm going to put the number of additions, and then you can do fixed price, and then the royalty split. But no, wait, what's this further up here? Oh, look, it's open additions. If I click on that, I can then select a closing time. So I'm going to pick the end of December. Let's have this open for a month. And then I can go, oh, actually, I'm going to have a Dutch auction. And then this is where you put your stuff in, so you can set all the levels. And then you can say when the opening time is going to be. If you're not verified, then it's going to have a little delay on that. I'm not sure how that works out with ETH. I'm going to assume I'm verified, but I don't know. And then I'm setting the opening time, and then that's pretty much the only difference here. So we've got, you can choose ETH at the beginning, and then you can choose it being an open edition at the end. So that's that. Let's go on. I'm not going to enable it. Oh, apparently I am going to enable it. Next step, all this type of stuff. So I'm going to give it a name. Lies, quick start, description. I'm going to go to the final preview, and then it would tell me how much it was going to cost. So I guess we're going to wait a little bit longer to find out the uploading cost, but that'll be done soon. But as you can see, it's pretty simple to pick a chain, to do it on-chain or off-chain, plus then the open editions thing is there. It's pretty exciting. And I think we'll call it a day for this video. There's a bunch more stuff like how a collection is going to show up on OpenSea, and can we update our profiles, which version of fxhash.js is the latest one, and so on, things like that. But I think it'll be good to let things play out a little bit for a week, and then we can catch up with that next Wednesday. I don't think I'm going to do any more sort of main thing tutorial style videos over the December, mainly because I want to have an easy time over December, just like nice and chill. But I think we'll have fun catching up each week with what's just happened. There's going to be quite a lot to talk about. And then in January, we'll get back to the actual nerdy coding stuff and tutorials. How does that sound to you? I will see you Friday online, and then next Wednesday here again. Goodbye.